Today we're beginning a new series on virtues. We're going to look at 5 different virtues: respect, mercy, diligence, patience, and prudence. But today I'm just focusing on respect. These are behaviors that are good for you, kind of like the moral equivalent of eating your vegetables. And I know that to many of us, eating our vegetables does not sound like something that exciting, although some of us really love vegetables. My tomatoes are starting to come in. They're starting to turn red. I think I ate a couple orange ones yesterday, and I was like, you know what? Close enough. I've been waiting a long time. But yeah, these are behaviors that is good for you, whether you're brand new to Christianity, whether you're not even a Christian, you're just thinking about it, or whether you've been a Christian for a long time. These are behaviors that just are good for you and good for life. And so our first one is called respect. And what I intend to do with you today is look at 4 points: our need for respect, living worthy of respect, showing respect, and using respect for God. And so my main point is that you should be respectful. Okay, so I'm going to use a lot of words to make that point, but that's really just the 2-word take home is be respectful, and not just to people that you admire. I think in our culture today we have a mindset that says, oh, you haven't earned my respect. Well, maybe non-Christians have that as a move, but we don't. We are called to respect everyone, as we'll see. In fact, the way Jesus put it is, in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. For this is the law and the prophets. And so my first point is that we all crave respect. We need respect. We seek respect. There's a certain amount of respect that we all, I think, by God are designed to want. Please go to 2 Samuel chapter 10. I think I can demonstrate your need for respect by thinking of the opposite, being disrespected. What does it look like when you're disrespected? What kinds of behaviors would that involve, getting disrespected by someone? What's that? If somebody... No, I'm saying, what do they do to you? Yeah, if somebody insults you, what else? Ignore you. Yeah. Let's say you're talking to somebody and they're just like, they're just playing on their phone, or they're just ignoring you. What else is disrespectful behavior? The interruption, right? Cutting you off in conversation. Yeah, you're talking, you're really getting to your point, and then somebody starts talking to this person you're talking to, or the person you're talking to starts talking to, and you're just like, I lost everything. I have no idea what I was saying. What's another disrespectful behavior? You guys think of another one?
Talking back to parents.
Talking back to parents. Yeah. What else? Yeah, just talking trash, talking badly, gossip, insulting someone, saying they're an idiot, they don't know what they're talking. Those are all disrespectful things. What about the eye roll? That's a little exaggerated form of it, but sometimes you see somebody give the eye roll, and you're like, I cringe when I see it. I'm like, oh gosh, you just got destroyed by that eye roll. Somebody just went nuclear. Texting instead of listening to somebody. What about crossing boundaries? Somebody just like shows up in your house, like Kramer on Seinfeld. Those of you who know that show, like you just show up and just open the door. It's like, no, you need to respect that person's boundaries. Like, are they? I mean, it depends. Actually, that one depends. Like, if you're going to your parents' house, I'm just gonna make an exception clause for myself. If you're going to your parents' house, you could just go in. You know what I mean? But, yeah, just like a friend's house, you should ring the doorbell or call or text or something. You know, you don't just trample on people's boundaries. I think that's That's obvious, right? Why do these things bother us? Why? And I don't think this is an American thing. I don't think it's distinctive to modern times. I think there's just a general constitution, or there's just like something in a nature, maybe that's the word. There's a nature in humans that just recognizes disrespect, and we're just like, ooh, I don't like that. There's just like a sense of injustice or offense when somebody disrespects us. And so I think there's a universal need. I believe it's a God-designed universal need for basic respect. So let's look at an example of supreme disrespect. And that's in 2 Samuel chapter 10, verse 1, where it says, "Sometime afterward, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him. David said, 'I will deal loyally with Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father dealt loyally with me.' So David sent envoys to console him concerning his father. When David's envoys came into the land of the Ammonites," and we'll just pause it there. So David hears that David's a king. Another king has died on a neighboring country. And David says, you know what? I respect this other ruler. I'm going to send over some representatives, and they're going to go over there and offer condolences. This is a standard operating procedure when somebody important dies, that other important people send over, flowers in our culture, but, a representative to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And at a political level, there's also a sense of like, hey, your previous ruler and I had a really good relationship, so let's keep that going, basically is what David's doing here. So he sends these guys over. In verse 3, it says, "The princes of the Ammonites said to their lord Hanun, 'Do you really think that David is honoring your father just because he has sent messengers with condolences to you? Has not David sent his envoys to you to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it?' Verse 4, so Hanun took the bad advice, and it says that he seized David's envoys, shaved off half the beard of each, cut off their garments in the middle at their waists, and sent them away." Now look, that's disrespect. I mean, half the beard. I mean, in all the wild styles and fads that have come and gone, I've never seen that one, where they just take off half of the beard. Like, it's not cool in any civilization in any time period. It's just like shaving half. I mean, just shave the whole thing. Shaved half the beard. Unbelievable. And then, if you cut a robe at the waist, guess what it's not covering? Your bits and pieces. The parts that you really want to have covered. And so these guys are leaving with a half beard and their parts out. And so they're totally disrespected. These are important envoys. They represent David to this new king of Ammon. And it says in verse 5, when David was told, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. The king said, "Remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return." So, yeah, you have to, if you're a bearded man, you understand this. The beard grows. It takes time, but it grows. And this actually caused a war. Thousands of people died as a result of this single act of disrespect. Thousands of people have died. How many millions of people have died throughout all time from acts of disrespect between one country and another? Respect is really a big deal, even though I think as Americans we don't think about it a lot because it's not like considered to be really important by our society. Presidents and celebrities and athletes and so forth, they don't really talk about respect that much like they talk about other things. But I think it is actually really important, and all of us do want to be respected. Let's move to my second point, which is living worthy of respect. Please go to 1 Samuel chapter 24. This is the idea of being respectable. And this is something you have some control over in your own life. How you live is determined to a large degree by your decisions and what you choose to do, especially when times are tough. When times are easy, it's easy to make good decisions, right? But when you're sick, when somebody just cuts you off, and you feel the emotion of road rage. Do you act on it or do you not? Do you start using sign language? I mean, what comes out of your mouth? And if you're dealing with something at work and you're being unfairly treated, that's when it's important to be respectable. Because in the easy times of life, everybody's respectable. They behave themselves generally. All right, so 1 Samuel chapter 24 is talking about Saul, the king of Israel, and how he was chasing David because he thought David was a threat. He was paranoid and he was jealous, so he's chasing David. David's hiding in caves, and Saul is using the military strength of the Israelite government, to chase down David. And David has literally never done a single thing wrong to Saul. Not once. In fact, he tried to join his family and marry his daughter. Or no, he did marry his daughter. And so he's actually his son-in-law too. And it's a very unfair situation. It says in verse 1 of 1 Samuel 24, when Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to look for David and his men in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds beside the road where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. I don't know if you realize this, but in the ancient world, they didn't have porta potties. They didn't have rest stops, and they didn't have, which is sometimes used, I won't mention any names, but on a long car ride, say, for example, to Indiana to attend a youth camp, they didn't have, bottles that, in a pinch, one could use to relieve himself. Usually it's a him in this case. But anyhow, so Saul sees a cave. He said, that cave is where I'm going to do my business. And, it's a great spot to go. He goes in the cave, and I don't know if he's whistling. I don't know if what he's doing, but he's doing his thing, right? We all relate to that. And then it says in verse 3, now David and his men, the second half of the verse, now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave. Isn't this hysterical? Because when you go to relieve yourself, especially number 2, it's not a quiet thing a lot of times, right? So there's Saul, and he's squatting and he's doing his thing. And David and all his men are in the same cave, watching or at least listening to him. Really, talk about awkward, right? Verse 4, the men of David said to him, here's the day of which the Lord said to you, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you. Then David went, and he must have been going number 2, because there's a lot of time that passes here. Because they see him, and he's doing it, and then they're like, David, you should kill him. And then David has time to sneak up. He sneaks up on him while he's going. And it says, then David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. And then he snuck back before Saul was done. So, I don't know. There you have it. Verse 5, afterward David was stricken to the heart because he had cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, the Lord forbid, or Yahweh forbid, that I should do this thing to my Lord, Yahweh's anointed, to raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord, or Yahweh's anointed. So David rebuked his men severely and did not permit them to attack Saul. Then Saul got up and left the cave and went on his way. That is what respect looks like. Well, that's actually disrespect and respect, right? It's disrespectful to sneak up on somebody that's going number 2. I mean, let's just be honest. That's not protocol, and cutting his clothing, that's disrespect too, right? But then he comes back and he's like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done? I've just cut the garment of the Lord's anointed," and he feels such shame. And his men are just like, "All you did was cut his garment? You could have cut his neck." And yet David's just overwhelmed with shame over the whole thing. He's like, I can't believe I just did that. I'm so embarrassed. Don't you dare touch him. We're going to let him go. He's anointed by God. Well, it's actually anointed by Samuel, God's representative, God's prophet. So he's anointed by God. Verse 8, it says, afterward David also rose up and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My lord the king." Now that must have been awkward, right? Because Saul is feeling good. He's feeling light. He's relieved. He had a good time in the cave, and now he's out of the cave. He's rejoining his men. And then out of the cave he was just in comes David, the person he's trying to kill. And he's like, "My lord the king." And Saul's like, I don't know what's going through his head, but it must have been something like, "Now, were you in there the whole time? Or did you just get here?" Or, oh, man. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground. Look at this respect, right? So David calls Saul Lord. He calls him king. And then he bows with his face to the ground and did obeisance. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of those who say, 'David seeks to do you harm'? This very day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you into my hand in the cave, and some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not raise my hand against my Lord, for he is Yahweh's anointed. See, my father, see the corner of your cloak." He calls him father here too. You see that? All this respect that David is showing to Saul. "I have the corner of a cloak in my hand, for by the fact that I cut off the corner of your cloak and did not kill you, you may know for certain that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you were hunting me to take my life." Verse 12, "May the Lord judge between me and you, and may the Lord avenge me on you, but my hand shall not be against you." That's respect. Even though Saul was doing him harm, he said, "You know what? God's going to judge you, but it's not going to be my hand. I could have killed you 10 minutes ago. I cut part of your garment. Here it is. You can see how close I got. Look down. You'll see there's a hole missing." Right? That's evidence that David was in that proximity with a knife, and he didn't, which should be good evidence to Saul that David does not want to kill him. He does not want him to suffer and all the rest of this that is going on here. And then look at this, verse 14. "Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom do you pursue? A dead dog, a single flea?" He's talking about himself. He's like, "I'm just like a dead dog. I'm a single flea. I am so insignificant. You're the king. I'm a loser." Right? That's what he's saying here. Verse 15, "May the Lord therefore be a judge between me and you." Verse 16, let's move along here. "When David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, 'Is this your voice, my son David?' Saul lifted up his voice and wept." You see, those actions of respect and those words of honor that David gave to Saul, it reached his heart. A lesser person would have gone to Saul and said to him, "You're an idiot. I hate your guts. I hope God kills you. And by the way, I could have killed you, but I didn't." Still same facts, but it's not said in a respectful way. Instead, he came out, he called him Lord, he called him King. He literally bowed in front of him, not in an idolatrous way as if he thinks he's God, but in a typical Eastern way where they bow to each other. And he bowed as deeply as he possibly could to show as much respect as he could. And then he calls himself just a dead dog and a insignificant flea. All these things, they reach the heart of Saul to the point where Saul says, "Oh no, what have I done? This is terrible. I shouldn't be pursuing this." It had the effect. What's the greater effect? To get your licks in and really insult somebody in front of your friends, or to reach that person so they change? And that's the lock that respect can undo for you. It can unlock that in somebody's heart. Not always. People have free will. They can still choose to be a jerk. But when you show respect, it takes away, it cuts out of the way a lot of the stuff that would block heart change. Verse 17, he said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. Today you have explained how you have dealt well with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me in your hands. For who has ever found an enemy and sent the enemy safely away? So may the Lord reward you with good for what you have done to me this day." And Saul left. He left. He took his men and he left. He went home, and it worked. So I think it's of great value to you to be respectable. David was respectable in this situation. How can you be respectable? Well, one thing is you show respect to somebody that doesn't deserve it. That's a way for you to be increase in respect in their eyes because they know they didn't deserve it. There are other things you can do to be respectable too. You can have integrity. I was with Josh this past week. We were in Indiana at a youth camp, 200 kids there, quite a production. On the stage, they had the fog machine and the light shows, like three different layers of lights, strips across, stuff shining around, and full band, just a big production. And anyhow, Josh said to me that he wanted to leave at a certain time. He wanted to leave at 7 a.m. on Friday. The event ends basically Thursday night, and then Friday, all there is breakfast. So Josh wanted to get home a little earlier. It's about 12 hours with all the stops. And so, I thought to myself, oh, does he really mean 7 a.m.? Or is that just like his desire? Because I need to find out, is this guy, because Josh has just come on staff. We're real excited about the work you're going to do, brother. I've known Josh for about 10 years now, maybe a little more, and real excited. But I don't know if he has integrity, for sure. You assume that about people, but you want to find out. So I said, I packed the night before so I could be ready within 5 to 10 minutes of consciousness, and because I'm not a morning person. So, I set the alarm, and I'm like, I wonder, I'm thinking if he's not going to wake up on time, I can sleep more. Because I don't care when we leave, you know what I mean? But I want to be respectful of him. He said 7 a.m., so, and sure enough, was it about 5 of 7? You knocked on the door, something like that, right? And I was like, okay, this man has integrity. He said we're going to leave at 7. He was ready. He was to me in time for me to get my stuff in the vehicle by 7. We got our stuff in the vehicle, and then we went to go get the kids and get their stuff from their building. He has integrity, And if you have integrity, guess what? You're respectable. People respect you more because they're like, oh, you did what you said you were going to do. Now I can trust you more. I can respect you more. Having discipline, caring about others, standing up for what's right, working hard, handling failure well. These are all behaviors that you can have in your life that will increase people's respect of you. Handling failures well is really difficult. It's really, really difficult. I was thinking about a couple of examples of this, and I was thinking about these two guys here, Lance Armstrong and Arnold Schwarzenegger. You guys have all heard of those two? So Lance Armstrong was a phenomenal cyclist. He won national titles. In 1993, he won the world championship. But then in 1996, he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And it was very significant. It went to his brain, it went to his lungs, and he had chemotherapy and whatever else. And somehow or other, he was able to beat this very nasty cancer that he had. That was in 1996. And then he returned to cycling in 1998. In 1999, 3 years after this cancer, he won the Tour de France, which is unbelievable. A cancer survivor coming back into absolute perfect physical shape. And he won it 7 times in a row, 1999 to 2005. But there's only one problem. He was cheating. He was cheating. He had, according to the USADA report, the most sophisticated, professionalized, and successful doping program that the sport has ever seen. He was cheating. So he was a winner, but he was also a failure. And when he was winning, everyone's thinking, "Oh yeah, look at this." Those of us who are Americans, we're like, "Yeah, this is our guy." An American's winning the Tour de France. It's Lance Armstrong. We're all just behind him. And then you find out that he was using enhancing drugs. He was also doing this really complicated thing with his own blood, where he's taking his own blood out during training and then put it back in during the race. So he'd have more red blood cells and oxygenated blood, so he'd perform better. And then finally, and then he denied it. For year after year after year, he denied that he did anything for 4 years. And then in 2013, he publicly admitted it on Oprah. He came clean on Oprah, but a lot of people didn't accept his apology. A lot of people thought it was shallow, that he wasn't really genuine, he didn't express emotion, and he said, well, everybody did it. Everybody's doping. And he was defensive and evasive. And you know what? As a result of this man who was probably the most capable winner of that sport, because of this, has lost respect. He has lost respect. He was at such a high level of respect. There's a picture of him with President George W. Bush riding mountain bikes together. You don't just ride mountain bikes with the president. You know what I mean? That's the level of respect he had. But I don't know if any politician would even answer his phone call anymore, because this whole thing was exposed and how he handled it. Arnold Schwarzenegger is very similar kind of meteoric rise. Here's somebody that was lifting weights, and at 20 years old, he became Mr. Universe, which is just ridiculous. 20 years old, Mr. Universe. Won in 1967, 68, 69, 70, and then he started to win Mr. Olympia from 1970 to 1975, which means from 1967 to 1975, literally every year he won the top position in the competitions he was in, and then also 1980. So then he becomes an actor. 1982, Conan the Barbarian. Some of you are old enough to remember Conan the Barbarian, and he carried around this big sword, and he had this absurd biceps and this Austrian accent, and he's killing it at the box office. Then his biggest one was 1984. What movie was it? The Terminator. So The Terminator. I'll be back. Right? And he was back. And I don't even know how many Terminators they made. Over 60 films. Then he's like, you know what? This is too easy. I think I'll just become the governor of California. Okay, Arnold. And he does. He wins. 2011, he wins. Or 2003, he wins up until 2011. Very respectable guy. But then in 2011, we find out that he had an affair. It was made public that he had an affair with one of the staff at his house and had fathered a child. So in 2011, his life altered dramatically. He was no longer the governor, and his wife separated from him because of this affair that he had kept secret. I think the affair actually occurred in 96 or something like that. So by the time 2011, the kid was like a teenager and looked just like Arnold. And when you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, you have kind of unique genes, I don't think the kid had the accent, but he had the face and the body type. So, and when this happened, Arnold Schwarzenegger lost respect. Just like Lance Armstrong, he lost respect because he had done this terrible thing. It had blown up his own life. His family was in turmoil. But then Arnold did something different than Lance did, which is Arnold owned it. And he did it in an autobiography, but then also in a documentary series that came out last year, 2023, 3-part documentary. And in the third part, he owned it. He said, I really messed up. I should not have done that. It's my fault. All the things that you're looking for when somebody fails, he said, I am devastated by the consequences of my actions. I am so sorry for what this has done to my family, to my ex-wife. And, he names her, and he just gets real honest with it, and he owns his failure. Because look, the fact is, we all fail from time to time. I hope you don't fail by doping or an affair, but whatever. There are many failures that we all have, and when you fail like that, you own it, you take responsibility, and you say, I'm going to do better. And you know what? That's respectable. So, how you handle failure is another indicator of respect. Number 3, and this is really important for all of us, is showing respect. This is actually the hard part. Showing respect to somebody you don't like. That's tough. That's tough. Showing respect to somebody who's a slacker, but also your boss. That's tough. Showing respect to politicians whose policies you hate. That's tough. That's tough. But yet we're still called to show respect to people in different positions. In fact, what the Bible says, I'm going to read you just a few of these. Leviticus 19:32 says, "You shall rise before the aged and defer to the old. You shall fear your God. I am the Lord," or I am Yahweh. This idea of rising when an older person comes in the room was part of their culture, and it's part of many people's cultures today, too. And it's the idea of respect. You respect the elderly. Romans 13:7, "Pay to all what is due to them, what is due them, taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, and honor to whom honor is due." And this is specifically talking about the evil government that had conquered the land of Israel and was taxing them and oppressing them. This is not like only to fair governments. This Romans 13 is written in the context of the Roman Empire, which had conquered Judea and had terrible governors in power. This is not like, oh, well, I'll respect you so long as you are good at your job. No, this is based on it's based on the office, not based on the person, this idea of respect to governing authorities. And this is important for us, too, because as we approach the November elections, I think the temptation is to get really amped up for our candidate, whatever candidate you like, and part of the way this happens in America, many other countries too, is we disrespect the other candidate. And we say, well, that person's an idiot, or they don't know anything, okay? And as a Christian, we just don't need to get sucked into that. You know, you can have your opinion, you can vote, you can support whoever you want to support, but we don't need to get sucked into the disrespect, the dishonoring, the shaming. You can criticize someone's action, sure. You can say, I think that was wrong. But there is a line, I think, that it's very easy for us to cross, because everyone around us is doing it, and we're not called to do that. And so that's why here in our teachings and in our prayer time, we don't get into partisan politics. It's just not who we are. We're here for God, and we know that because of your stand for God and because of your belief in what the Bible says, you have political opinions. Okay, that's fine. That's good. But we're just not getting into the candidates and the politics in our Sunday services. Look, there's literally everywhere else in the world where you can get into it, and everyone else is into it, and that's what all they're talking about. This is just a little space where we can have a demilitarized zone on that particular subject. Okay. And that's the idea of respect. Respecting other people's boundaries, respecting the situation that's going on. And I do want to say this too. I wasn't here last Sunday, but I hear we prayed for Donald Trump, who had been shot. I think that was the right thing to do. And I think if Joe Biden had been shot, we should have prayed for him too. Because that's a respectful thing to do, is to pray for those who are in authority, and also to recognize people who are suffering, that they do need prayer. You know what I mean? So anyhow, I don't want to get too distracted on that. Ephesians chapter 6 says you're supposed to obey your parents. This is my parents' favorite verse. When I was growing up, heard it a lot. Right, Erica? You hear that verse a lot? I think you probably heard it a lot too. Peter might have heard it a couple of times. Yeah, some of us, Jacera, you heard it a little bit. Okay. Anyhow, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. You're supposed to respect your parents. And that's hard sometimes when you disagree with your parents as a kid. That's real hard. It does not say you have to agree with your parents. It says you have to obey them and show them honor. Now, if your parents are asking you to do something that God says is wrong, you disobey your parents. Okay, so there is like a time and a place for that to happen, but that's probably not what's going on. Ephesians 5:33, each of you, however, should love his wife as himself, and a wife should respect her husband. Now, I believe that husbands should also respect their wives. I don't think there's like this idea that wives can be unloving to their husbands and husbands can be disrespectful to their wives. That's not what this verse is saying. Just because it's saying that wives should, or that husbands should love their wives and that wives should respect their husbands, doesn't mean the opposite is also the case. So what we're saying is you need to respect your husband, obviously, but also husbands should respect their wives. 1 Thessalonians 5:12-13, but we appeal to you, brothers and sisters, to respect those who labor among you and have charge of you in the Lord and admonish you. Esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves. This is talking about church leaders. So, when it comes to showing respect, who do you show respect to? The elderly, governing authorities, your parents. And, I know most of you are adults. Many of you, your parents are no longer living. But some of you, your parents are living, and you're no longer under their authority because you're grown, you're out of the house. But you can still honor, you can still respect your parents, even if they disagree with you about whatever. And I think that's valuable. And then also it says respecting in your husband in marriage, and then respecting church leaders is 1 Thessalonians. But and I bet you already knew all that, most of you who are Christians for a long time. But have you thought about this one? Respecting your critics. This is the hard one, I think. The other ones are kind of, like, even if you don't do it, you should. Whereas this one's like, no. My critics, the people who criticize my faith, I should blow them up on social media. I should where's that caps lock? Angry, capitalized letters, you're an idiot. I can't believe you don't think the same as I do. Right? That's where it's okay to be disrespectful. No. 1 Peter says this, 1 Peter 3:14, but even if you do suffer for doing what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear, and do not be intimidated, but in your hearts sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. So even when you're defending yourself, you're defending Christianity, you're giving your reasons for your faith, you do it in a respectful manner. Respect does not mean agreement. I can respect John and we can disagree. What's your favorite kind of ice cream, Brother John? Yeah, you're wrong. It's not vanilla. But I still respect that you like vanilla, so if I'm going to go to your house and I'm going to bring an ice cream, I'll bring a vanilla ice cream, even though I know it's peanut butter cup. You know what I mean? Not in chocolate ice cream either. In vanilla, you're half right. But, we don't have to agree on everything to respect each other. That's what he likes. He knows what I like. We can be respectful and disagree. What are other signs of respect that you can think of? If somebody shows you respect, what does it look like? They're probably not going to bow to the ground before you, right? That's not our culture. But like, what would they do? Yeah, greet you. Yeah. Somebody who comes up to you and warmly greets you, like Omar this morning gave me a hug. He was happy to see me. Thank you, Omar. People that come and are genuinely happy to see you. This is what it's like to be disrespectful, is to sort of come across somebody and just be like, just to ignore them, right? And walk in a way that is disrespectful. What's another respectful thing you can do? Listen, absolutely. What else? Speak kindly. What else? I missed that. What was that? Let them go before you. Yeah, deferring to somebody, that's respectful. If you see somebody that's struggling with something, helping them as opposed to taking advantage of them. I had an experience this morning because Brittany told me that Taco Bell has the best breakfast. Well, actually Josh told me that, but then Brittany agreed, which really made me consider this possible. So anyhow, I went to Taco Bell this morning for breakfast because I'm into the breakfast burrito. And the lady had a disability at the window. Something with her hand was, misshapen, or there was a difficulty there, and she was just struggling. And so I'm sitting there in the car. I'm waiting for the food. It's taking a long time. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm struggling. I have enough time, though. I left at a good time today, so I could be here on time this morning. So I wasn't, freaking out, but, I was just, I was struggling. So she finally opens the window, and she hands me the food and tells me to have a nice day. What did she forget? Payment. That's kind of an important part of the thing. So I said to her, "Did you want me to pay?" And she said, "Oh, yes. Thank you for telling or reminding me." And, so then I paid her, and then I left. It's easy to take advantage of somebody that's frazzled or somebody that's having a hard time, and that's not respectful. I don't have to know her to respect her enough to say, "Look, you forgot something, like the money part," right? So those are different things we can do to respect. Invite somebody over for dinner. Care about their feelings. Ask for permission on something rather than just doing it. Sometimes we can be overwhelming in our gifts, where you give somebody something. The classic example is the husband that gives his wife a bowling ball for her birthday, and she doesn't bowl. I mean, of course, if it was Donna, she would take the bowling ball. But, finding out what somebody actually wants, actually likes, that's a way to be respectful in how we give gifts to each other. Accepting it when somebody says no, instead of pushing and pushing and pushing and making it into this big thing. And now you're not going to be friends anymore unless they change their mind and say yes. That's disrespectful. Accepting somebody's no. Giving somebody credit for their work. Saying thank you. Showing consideration for other people's preferences. If you have somebody over for a meal and they have a nut allergy or they don't eat gluten or whatever, and you make them peanut butter and jelly, that's disrespectful. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. But if you do know and then you do it anyhow, and because I think you really can eat peanut butter, and we're going to find out right now. You got your EpiPen, you got 911 on the speed dial. We're going to do a test. We're going to find out if you really, no, that's the boundary thing again. So I'd like to move on to my last point, which is using respect for God. Some of you will find yourselves in situations, I think all of us at different times in life, where you are respected because of how you've lived. You do have a respect. People do, in a situation, they do look up for you. And if you are in a situation where you have respect, you have an opportunity to influence for God's purposes in a situation, for godly purposes. And we see this with Gamaliel. Let's look at Acts. We'll just close here. Acts chapter 5. Gamaliel is not a Christian. He's not a Christian. He's a Jewish leader, and the Jewish leaders are there, and they're dealing with what Peter and John have done and this upstart movement, these Jesus followers, and they don't like them, and they want to kill them. And Gamaliel was a respected member of the Sanhedrin, of the council, of the political governing body. And this is what he says in Acts 5:33. When they heard this is the Jewish leadership, they were enraged and wanted to kill them. And you know what? These people had just had Jesus killed. So they know how to do that. This is not a metaphor. They literally wanted to kill them. And they know how to do it. They just bring them over to the governor, and they say, this is what these guys did. You have to kill them, and if you don't kill them, you're not a friend of Caesar's, and we're going to tell on you. Which is basically what they did to Jesus. Verse 34, but a Pharisee in the council named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, respected by all the people, stood up and ordered the men to be put outside for a short time. There's wisdom there, too. Get these guys out of here. Let's talk about it among ourselves, and then we'll bring them back in. Verse 35, then he said to them, fellow Israelites, consider carefully what you propose to do to these men. For some time ago, Theudas rose up, claiming to be somebody, and a number of men, about 400, joined him, but he was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and disappeared. After him, verse 37, Judas the Galilean rose up at the time of the census and got people to follow him, and he also perished, and all who followed him were scattered. So in the present case, I tell you, keep away from these men, let them alone, because if this plan or undertaking is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is of God, you will not be able to overthrow them. In that case, you may even be found fighting against God. Wow. So he says, look, let's let them go. Because if this is just a human thing, if these guys are just looking to start some new club or organization or revolution or whatever, it's going to fail. Every other one has failed before this. We know it's going to fail. But if it's of God, and it could be of God, then guess what? It's going to win whether you kill them or not. And you don't want to be fighting against God. And he persuaded them. He persuaded a room full of people, the same people that killed Jesus. He persuaded them to let Peter and John go because he had their respect. And so if you are able to gain people's respect and live in a respectable manner, then you can influence people for good and for God. So in conclusion, be respectful. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for the scriptures that can lead us and guide us and show us how to live. We pray and ask that you would help us to be respectful of others, that you would help us to be respectable ourselves, and that even if we fail in life morally or in other ways, that you would help us to be able to do the right thing and regain respect and be able to continue following Jesus as our Lord. We pray for these things, and we ask you to bless us this week as we endeavor to serve you. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.